So someone that may not even be able to pedal can still use a throttle-based bike.
So just to clarify, the pedal-based would be allowed. That would be what you would consider an adaptive mountain bike that would be allowed on the trail system?
Something like a bowhead reach would be allowed as well because it's governed. It has a governor, or it's just built to meet the wattage standards and the speed standards that are the same as like a hand cycle.
Okay, can I ask you one more question on this? Because I just find these are fascinating and they're very new to me. So that would be mostly flat, is that right? Do they climb very much?
Yep, these can climb. The the groups that I've seen using something like the bowhead reach, uh, they appreciate touring on them, going to see different what we call positive control points, like viewpoints and things like that, and descending as well. These are very nimble bikes. If you search up the bowhead reach, you can see some pretty cool mini documentaries about them testing out um, what these are capable of in terms of like terrain that they can access, touring that they can, the places they can get to, and carrying gear and things like that. The inventor took a spin around, I think, Bow Valley, an overnight trip, and carried gear and tested out the terrain. That's pretty exciting to see that they're still able to get out there and do some of the similar outdoor activities that we appreciate so much out here.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. I'm not going to ask what the price of those things are.
Yeah.
Later.
So part of this grant was to actually find a line item was to have a fleet of adaptive bikes, and some of them were these bowhead reach, part for educational purposes and part for adaptive tourism. There's a growing network of adaptive trails. I was part of the formation of the Kootenay Adaptive Sport Association. I'm not on the board or anything, but I was at the initial kind of envisioning meetings in Nakusp a few years ago. And they've got a good network of adaptive trails there. And slowly, I think Revelstoke and now Cranbrook just built one. Golden just built some adaptive trails. So there's a growing network. And CASA's initial vision was to create kind of a adaptive mountain bike circuit, because it is a lot of work to get your bike and self to these places. So having a number of places that people can come to is will be valuable.
Interesting. Thanks. Councillor Keto's got a question.
Ryan, I just heard you mention the new trail in Cranbrook. Is that trail on Eager Hills below R2 Detour?
It is. It's called Padawan. It is not officially open, but I've spoken to the designer and part builder about that. And yeah, it's a new 6-kilometer trail of the easiest grade, or second easiest grade, adaptive trail. And then they're adding 8 more kilometers of the next level up.
It's actually a very pleasant walk. You can walk side by side. It's a very, very nice trail.
Yeah, I took my kids on it on Saturday and they loved it. So a 5-year-old
All
was
right,
able to
that's
ride
good.
it.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan.
Next slide. I think we skipped one there, maybe. Maybe I'm wrong. Sorry, go ahead. Trail standards. So this project's going to use a set of trail standards. These are industry standards for building trails for mountain bikes, and then e-bikes and adaptive bikes. So there's the Kootenay Adaptive Sports Association that I mentioned. They've created the adaptive mountain bike trail building standards, and they kept them fairly conservative. And yeah, there's just guidelines for grades and features that can be on a trail, that different types of people and bikes will be able to navigate. And then there's the longstanding International Mountain Bike Association trail building standards that helps with sustainability. There's just guidelines on how you should deal with water and erosion and safety and things like that. And then finally, there's the Whistler Trail Building Standards. So in certain cases, it's certain user groups want to kind of break the rules of the IMBA standards. Whistler Trail Standards offers solutions to still create sustainable trails that have features that are exciting for different types of bikes and will not erode and will withstand pressures. There's many trails in Whistler that were built with Whistler Trail Standards that have been the same ever since I've been going there for the last 15, 18 years. And I know it's easy to look at that name, Whistler Trail Standards, and get a little bit scared, but it's really truly just a set of standards from one of the capitals of mountain biking in BC. Next slide, please. So this project was from the Tourism Affected Communities Grant or Tourism Dependent Communities Grant. It was the city of Kimberley that applied for the grant. And they'll be in charge of the financial management and reporting. The city will be hosting the tenders and RFPs. And then there is an agreement in the contribution agreement that says the city has to have ownership of assets for, I think, a minimum of 5 years. And there's a few things in there that can have others maintain different things and stuff like that. Kimberley Trail Society will be supporting the building of projects and then communicating all the trail project ideas with the different stakeholders in town, helping with route marking, helping the city decide on the contractors that they pick. We've worked with many contractors in the area and have a lot of connections to other towns with good contractors. So we'll help make those decisions. We'll uphold the trail standards, the trail project planning, and then future maintenance, and we'll also be creating a signage plan that will complement this new project. Sustainable Kimberley is spearheading the charging stations, looking into land agreements for facilities and amenities for the different charging stations. They'll also be working with us on accessible washrooms, and they are still looking for a grant to bring a fleet of adaptive bikes to our area. Any questions about that map? Next slide, please. So it's a pretty substantial budget. It's a pretty exciting budget. And it's divided up like this. I'll just go over it really quickly, and I won't go over the line items for each of the different projects, but it is there for your viewing. So the city of Kimberley, for the roles that I just mentioned, has allocated $10,000 to that, just to cover the extra time and whatever personnel may be needed. For the accessible washrooms and charging stations, there's a total with a contingency of $303,000. And for the trail amenities, there's a total with contingency of $531,000. And then there is additional funds in there of just over $6,000 that can be kind of pushed around. Next slide, please. There's a number of projects. I've kind of alluded to a lot of them already. There's the trail network projects. There's a solar base camps and urban e-bike charging. I'll talk to both of those in a few moments. There's the signage and education. That'll come later in the project once it's being built out. And then the small part is development of standards. So we're working with the Kootenay Adaptive Sports Association, and we'll be working with speaking with e-bike companies and tourism groups to see if there are any additional considerations that we should use when we're building with e-bikes in mind. Even though these trails will be open to other users, we think there'll be some things that we need to consider with e-bikes in mind. And of course, there's the stuff with adaptive bikes in mind. You may have heard about phase 2 and 3. Those are still purely in planning phases so I wouldn't speculate too much, but the idea is to try and use mostly existing arterial links to other towns in our area, either through solar charging at access points or resting places like campgrounds and back roads. Next slide, please. So the administrative projects, there's the ones that the city is going to be doing as far as the trails go. There's the planning, the trail routing, and signage and mapping plan that we'll be working with the different groups. And then there's kind of an outlier project that still fits into this really nicely. It's the wayfinding and working with the Tenah stations to see the feasibility of providing a trail linkage to some place like the St. Eugene Resort. You can go to the next slide. There is a budget for all those other things there. I don't think it's in this slideshow though. It is in your information package that I think you should have all received though. So I've divided the trail projects into 4 different projects that fit well together. And I see these being how we may put out the tenders. So the first set of projects is a cross-country ring trail and then adaptive mountain bike trails and some trail connections. So this includes, it's not all new trails. There is some upgrades to trails. So it's a upgrade to the popular Magic Line loop. That's one of Kimberley's most popular mountain bike loops. As per the heat map that you'll see in your information package, you can kind of see the brighter color on that heat map. And that's how we get that data about who's using what and how often they're using it. So an upgrade of that, because it has deteriorated over time, and we've learned a lot about design since that trail was built. It was actually one of the first trails that Kimberley Trail Society had built, and it was also a fairly new builder, and some honest mistakes were made, and I think we can fix a lot of those mistakes and make that trail once again a sought after loop. And then there'll be an e-bike, multi-use and adaptive mountain bike loop around the Nordic Center. Different parts of that will be for different uses. And then we're in the process of flagging and planning that out. And then finally, connector trails to and from the nature park to the Kimberley Nordic Center. If you go to the next slide, I will point out the different routes. Oh, there's a budget for all these projects. So in the grant, they were divided up into multiple lines. I've kind of grouped them together because a lot of them connect. And as far as tenders go, I wouldn't split them up because contractors would be just stepping on each other's toes anyway. So these are the line items split back out, and you can see the total budget there. So this is the Project 1 map. If you look at the yellow line that's kind of contouring, the Nordic Center parking lot is at the very top where it says Trickle Creek Golf Resort. And the yellow squiggles in there are the current Magic Line and Happy Hans loop. So those are the ones that will be upgraded to kind of make them more sustainable. And then parts of it on the Happy Hans will be actually upgraded to be used as an adaptive mountain bike trail. The orange lines in there is kind of that ring trail that I was talking about, the one that goes all the way around, and then just at the bottom it touches into the nature park. That will be the west side of it is more geared towards the mountain biking and e-bike, and the east side of it is slightly more of the adaptive part of this project. And then the loop of Happy Hans that you can see going around that first bump at the Nordic Center is as well planned to be an adaptive trail. Next slide, please. So Trail Project 2 are more the niche projects. I call them the descents because that's what they are. This is what a lot of mountain bikers are seeking nowadays, and these will be a tourist attraction as well. These will be engaging descents for adaptive mountain bikes as well as e-bikes. So some will be made for e-bikes and some will be made for adaptive bikes. These will be built to IMBA and Whistler standards so they can stay fairly similar to what they were when they're built. And then adaptive mountain bike guidelines for the adaptive descent. Go to the next slide, please. I'll explain those a little bit more. So this is the budget. Again, just line items for these. They're all slightly shorter trails. Next slide, please. So the Project 2 is the blue lines that you'll see on your map. If you know the Nordic Center well, where it says bump 1, that's that first knoll at the Kimberley Nordic Center, where K1 and Screwdriver and those are. From the top of that, we're hoping to build a adaptive descent. So riders would use mostly a Nordic trail to ascend that bump. There's some nice grades of Nordic trails in there, and we'd probably put an access near the top so they could complete that climb, and then a descent down there. Near the Cardiac Hill, if you're familiar, an additional advanced cross-country. I wouldn't necessarily call it a descent, but it will be mostly built for going one direction. There's a lot of viewpoints and beautiful features in there that can be used. And then over, if you're familiar with the ridge between Mose and kind of the Larch Loops, there's opportunity for 2 more descents in there. And again, those will be built more for e-bike and mountain bike type riders. Next project, or next slide, please. So project 3 is a bit smaller. We have been working with a number of groups. RCR is one of those groups, and they're interested in making connections from the base of RCR to these trail networks. So this project is a connection to and from RCR, and then these would be built to allow adaptive mountain bikes to access to and from the Nordic Center. There's just a line item for the ski hill connector. We're hoping to build one to the south and another one kind of towards the north, the T-bar side. The reason for that is exploring the idea of using the base of the ski hill for round the mountain in the future, possibly. And then there's one more line item in there about a connector from through levers. There's currently no yeah, you can go to the next slide there. There's currently no single track that's that reasonable from the Swan entrance to the trail network. And so we're hoping to put one more that connects to the Ponderosa Trail. And those are those purple lines. You can see the RCR one and the levers one in this image. Next slide, please. And project 4, again, a little bit smaller. We don't necessarily need to go through these projects in this order either. This is the trail sustainability upgrades. This is looking at those C-grade trails and seeing what we can do. One project that we put in here is realigning that chute trail. It's about 800 meters, and we have an approval from the province about realigning that trail, and then performing a bunch of other mitigation issues around the trail network for erosion. And so we'll be talking with different groups until we use up the budget for that project.
Got a question for you, Ryan, from Councillor Roberts.
Ryan, I just didn't add it all up before I came, but are all of the projects included in the grant, or are some of them forthcoming?
I would say most of the projects, pretty much all the projects are included in the grant. There's a bit of like, if we move, like if we eliminate something, there was still talks with the nature park over how the section in the nature park, the Higgins-Richardson's connector, will be built. They seem to be leaning towards more supporting a regular mountain bike trail, not an adaptive in that area. And so there may be flexibility to change move some of those funds into adding additional adaptive mountain bike trail features up at the Nordic Center. But for the most part, I would say 95% of these projects are line items that were in the grant application.
And do you see the 4 projects going one after the other or simultaneous?
I see project 1 going first, and then project 2 and 4 kind of being worked towards. Project 4 could be completed fairly quickly here. And then project 3, just we need to work a little bit more with RCR to finalize, and the city to finalize those routes.
All right, thank you.
The corridors are mostly there already. It's just a matter of making agreements and stuff. So. Okay, so the budget for the administrative came down here, I guess. So there's just the line items for planning, trail routing, signage, and mapping, and then wayfinding. So trail project process. So whenever you build a trail, there's a lot of steps. You don't just run up into the woods and start digging, as that definitely frustrates a lot of people. So there's the initial flagging. That's about the only way that you can kind of GPS properly and show other people what the plan is for the trail. So you go out and you flag the trails using flagging tape, like they do with logging, and then people can walk that. And then I brought the Nordic Center group, the board of the Nordic Center, on a walkthrough. They originally had some concerns, but on that walkthrough, they saw a lot of potential and benefit to the summer trails and how they can use them in the winter, as well as us working together to cooperate more with the transition between winter and summer and winter, and all the different things that we can kind of combine forces on to make that area even more of an amenity to town. If there's any issues, we can do some revisions and fix any concerns there. And then eventually the city releases the projects to tender, contracts are awarded. We continue to work with the stakeholders on work, making sure everyone knows where work is happening and if there are any events planned, working around those. Then the corridor needs to be cleared, and there's guidelines for that in those standards that I mentioned earlier. And then the trail gets what's called pin flagged, and that's a more fine route. That's within usually a few meters of what the final trail route will be. And then there's an optional second walkthrough for any other concerns. Eventually the trails get built, signage gets added, we mitigate any future or new issues, and we look after them long-term and provide maintenance. Next slide, please. So another part of this project is the e-bike charging stations and accessible washrooms that Sustainable Kimberley is helping with as well. So there's just a concept. So don't take this as a picture of exactly what you're going to see, because I don't think anyone wants to see a giant sea can in the middle of the Platzl as a charging station. The goal is to design these to look nice. And I don't think in all cases will a giant box be needed. That's why the picture on the right shows just a locker. There are already pre-made devices out there that you can remove the battery from your e-bike and charge it in kind of like a charging locker, kind of like those TELUS charging stations that you have at the airport, where you put in a code and then you come back half an hour later and it's mostly charged. So that would allow people at different locations in town to do a ride to that location, sit, have a drink, or sit in the sun, relax, rest, or stay the night, and then charge their e-bike battery and then continue on.
Brian, just to interrupt for a second, Councillor Goodwin, and then Councillor Keto have questions for you.
Yeah. Hi, Ryan. So I'd like to spend a bit of time talking about the charging stations, because I think the whole idea is sort of transformed a little bit. There was originally a plan to put these way out in the backcountry, and that's why they were solar powered. They have 21 kilowatt hour batteries in them for storage, because et cetera. But now we're looking at putting them in town. They can be tied to the grid. They don't need storage batteries. They don't need a very large solar panel system. And I'm wondering, and I also have been looking into e-bike charging, and to fully charge an e-bike takes 2 to 6 hours, depending on what battery you have. I think if people are coming to town with their e-bikes and staying in hotels, they'll just take the batteries in overnight and plug them in the hotel room. It costs under 10 cents to charge a battery fully from zero, and hotels won't mind that. I think you could probably take them into restaurants. I think some of the restaurants will start catering to that. So I'm not sure if we want to spend $225,000 on some charging stations for just bike batteries. And I'm wondering if we should be looking at building some dual purpose charging stations, because we need more electric car chargers in Kimberley. And I think we could build a couple of stations at least with this funding that would do both cars and e-bike batteries. Maybe put one at the north end of the Platteville, maybe by Center 64, where we own that parking lot, and people could park their cars there, or you could put your batteries there. Maybe one in Marysville at the Eco Park. We could put one down there and people could charge cars there. I'm not sure if the government would go for this change. We'd still have the solar panels on the top, and it would still charge e-bikes, but it wouldn't only charge e-bikes. And I think it's worth having a look at something like that. What do you think?
I think it's a fantastic idea, honestly. I get so excited. There's been a few articles and stuff going around about how, mostly in the US, I guess, the different solar charging stations are going up in places like Moab, where people commute or recreate in the backcountry, but with electric off-road vehicles. So I do see that the dual purpose being an important one. I'd like to talk more with the financial people and the people that know the ins and outs of the grant a bit more about how we can make that work. And perhaps it's just about separating the line items and using the e-bike money towards this.
Yeah, it may not be possible with the government's expectations, but I think it would be worth having that discussion.
But at least maybe in the same, like you're onto something about being in the same area even. Yeah, I like that idea though. Definitely good.
Councillor Keto.
Ryan, have any of the locations been agreed to? Because following I was made aware of a Facebook comment this morning that we're chopping down trees and have already decided where this is going. I'd like to know where that's at the moment, if any locations have been decided.
I read that those tree comments as well, and I just had to shake my head at the conclusions people jumped to. I didn't realize that I was in speculation of this project, but we haven't finalized the exact locations where the charging stations go. I think the next slide goes into our proposed locations. If you want to skip to that, we can talk about those.
One more question, Ryan.
Yeah.
Mayor McCormick.
Yeah, more, I guess, comment than a question. And part of phase one, in fact, a large part of phase one of what we're doing is what I would call proof of concept. And so when we talk about phases 2 and 3, where we are in fact getting outside of, downtown or, within the city boundaries, we need to have collected some intelligence on charging and how that might happen once we do get out into the kind of the other areas. So phase 1, if you take a look at the grant application, was always about pieces of this that would be pilot, where we're going to learn something for future phases. And the other comment you've already touched on, Kent, and that is that the funds that we get are very specific to the application that went in. And it's unclear whether or not we would be allowed to modify how those funds are spent. In any event, all of that's worth looking into, and none of the charging stations or the washrooms are planned to be there for a long time yet. All of the trail work and everything is going to be done first. So we've got literally months or maybe even a year to be able to figure out exactly whether or not what we can do and what we can't.
Councillor Dallum has a question, but before Councillor Dallum goes in, Jim, do you have any comments on this thus far? On this?
Just with regards to, making changes to the application, the contribution agreement does indicate that the wording of it is that any request for changes or variations to the project, including significant changes, which is defined in here, will be made in writing to the province. They must produce similar results to that which the grant was originally approved. So we do have the opportunity to make a request to the province. And just one more comment or maybe a question to Ryan while we're talking about the solar stations in the downtown area. In the development plan, it indicates that the charging stations at possibly the visitor center and the Plateau will be delivered with existing funds by the city of Kimberley and Kimberley Tourism. Not quite sure what that's referring to, but it sounds like those components of the project won't be funded with this grant.
Yeah, I'd have to ask Andrew Bond, who put that section together, a bit more details about that. I had heard that there was funding for similar charging stations in the Plateau, but we haven't eliminated that from this project based on that speculation, I guess.
Ryan, Scott's going to weigh in.
Yeah, hi, Ryan.
Hi.
We've got a Columbia Basin Trust grant to do a solar charging station in the Plateau. But,
Yep.
you know, if it comes down to which grant might be more flexible, we could certainly write to CBT or could possibly be the resort municipality grant money we get. But there is flexibility, and we might be able to repurpose that money if Sustainable Kimberley can build something in the Plateau.
Okay.
Councilor Dowling, did you have a question?
Just a little bit of a statement of clarification. The original project was never the city's initiative. So looking at phases 2 and 3 and pieces outside the city, I don't want anybody that's watching this to think that the city is going to be building things out there in the, beyond what's happening within this grant, because the city's not responsible for those things. And it's the conglomerate of the groups that originally started this that would be responsible for those further phases.
Okay. Councilor Goodwin?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to the mayor's comment about proof of concept, because I don't know what concept we need to prove with these. I think the concepts, I think the fact that solar panels will collect energy and that batteries will store it and that we can hook up charging systems to it, it's not really complex technology. So I think we will sort of be able to do that with dual purpose stations here in town. They will have a solar component, but not a really big one. And they'll be grid tied so we can get, I mean, it makes it a lot simpler, but well, not a lot simpler, a little bit simpler. A lot cheaper probably. So anyway, we'll see. I look forward to the discussion.
Final comment from the mayor, Ryan, and then I'll allow you to continue on. Thank you for your patience.
Sounds good. No problem.
Yeah, no, fair enough, Councillor Goodwin. We're not buying technology, we're buying products. And various vendors put the technology together in different ways with these products. And though we have to make sure that the products that we're buying and how that technology is built into them are suitable for the locations that these are going to be. So yeah, it's very true. We know what solar charging is, but we have to buy products that are going to work in the areas that we need them to work. So that's the element of the proof.
Okay.
There's a few outlying, I'll just comment one more thing on that. There's a few outlying things that have yet to be figured out, like the types of plugs, and whether people will want to remove their batteries or not, or lock their bikes, depending on where they go. Like if they're at campgrounds, whether it's a bike locker system or just a battery locker system. I know some bikes out there you can't remove the battery. The battery is embedded in the frame pretty much permanently. And so there's a few little things there that I think we'll figure out as this project moves forward. But I'm still in favor of looking into the dual purpose charging stations for sure. So I'll move on. As for the locations, the Plateau was one that we just discussed a whole bunch on. RCR, or up at the Nordic Center. And there was that talk about being able to charge it in your house or your hotel. My e-bike that I use for trails, I do commute on it sometimes to Cranbrook. I can make it all the way to Cranbrook, and I usually get there with about I usually use about, I don't know, half the battery, just under half the battery getting there. And on the way back, it's usually more of a wind and more uphill. And I usually run out of battery somewhere around the Volksmark Trail, and I end up pedaling the rest of the way home. And after work, that's not that fun on an e-bike, to be honest. And if I had charged it at work, even for an hour, I'd probably make it all the way home. So those are the little things that we may learn as we go, how people use these charging stations too. And then the last location that we're exploring, there was some concern originally about having the charging stations way out of town and who's going to own and who's going to maintain that. So we've changed that idea to on or near staging areas for the Trans-Canada Trail, because that was mentioned a lot in the grant. And so when I say on or near staging areas, those areas that we're looking at are places like campgrounds or places that people stay overnight. And then finally, accessible washrooms. The place that has the biggest need probably for an accessible washroom is the Kimberley Nordic Center. Yes, they do have a facility up there that's indoors, but that comes with a lot of other maintenance things if we were to open that up in the summertime. And the Kimberley Nordic Center actually sees a lot of value in having a separate accessible washroom somewhere else on the grounds. And so we've been working with them on a potential design and location of that Nordic Center washroom. Next slide, please.
That's a good one.
Okay, go ahead.
Ryan, I just want to throw out that we do need to be careful. We can't, the city isn't allowed to give assistance to business. So I don't know if we could put one at RCR or at the Kimberley Riverside Campground, which is now privately held, but there may well be other options.
Are you for washrooms?
No, for charging station.
For charging stations.
That was on your list. I was just commenting on what you had on your list. I've already proposed other options, but we have that discussion to come.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. This is the budget for this next group of amenities: the accessible washrooms, solar charging stations, planning of these things, and then there's a contingency fund that can be spread out through those things. I think some of this money, as Councillor Goodwin talked about, will probably shift around ever so slightly. Next slide, please. That's actually all I have. If there's anything that's unclear, you are welcome to ask.
Ryan, I have a question I'll start off with here. There'll probably be more questions.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I was wondering about, and I'm going to go through an example. So an example would be the large loop and the Kimberley Nordic Trails.
Yeah.
So that's the city of Kimberley has a license of occupation, and the Nordic Club as a society runs it all. So the large loop trails, though, when that was built, there were a lot of Douglas fir around 100 years old pushed over to make that trail, like 50 trees pushed over.
You're talking about the Centennial and Snowbird Loop?
Just large loop alone has 50 trees.
Oh, large loop. Okay. That's
Yeah.
what I mean. Yeah.
So you had mentioned new trails between Mose Canyon and Larch Loop. And there's an OGMA there, an old growth management unit that CAN4 has reminded me when I hiked through there with the foresters. The OGMA is the old growth management unit. There are trees in there that are several hundreds of years old. And
yeah, they're beautiful.
It's identified that but it's not protected yet. So my question to you is, during this project, is there a possibility to be working with CAN4, Ministry of Forests, City of Kimberley, just because the old growth management unit is a beautiful space that would afford interpretive education as part of the big project here. And it's also needs to be protected carefully. So to me, it's almost like, yes, there are trails and adaptive trails going in and all different things, but there's also current mini ecosystems, for example, the Ogma old growth area, that should be factored into the bigger picture around education and tourism. It's ecological tourism. So anyway, I'm just hoping that that all gets factored in, and the city, it requires other players to come into the conversation for sure.
Yeah. And I think the area you're referring to specifically is kind of where the Mussers Trail comes down into Mose Canyon, that kind of forest there.
Yeah, that's the area. Yeah.
So yeah, definitely limited trails there. And we hadn't kind of made any plans to modify anything in that area, or definitely not remove any trees in that zone. But I've seen a lot of opportunity throughout our trail system for further interpretive signage, and maybe, looking at what we can do with the forest.
I think it, also, just as another comment, would be, an example on the opposite side of the mountain is Horse Barn Valley. So that's a protected area, rec sites and trails. In my mind, rec sites and trails should consider working with you folks on this to further protect this side of the mountain, which is the Ogma area. And I have mentioned this to Lisa Cox about this, and she did identify that it is Ogma, but that does not give it protection. And also it's a corridor for wildlife coming down from the calving area up above.
Yeah, the elk will use that for sure.
Yeah. Anyway, the reason I'm raising this, Ryan, is it's an opportunity to bring all the players in. It's trails, if we're going down the road to attract people to Kimberley. I think it's really an interesting place there ecologically, and it'd be nice to have an interpreted site. Do some dendrochronology on the trees, understand how old they are, when were they seedlings, why are they still there? Fire comes into it all. It's a very interesting ecological story there. So
yeah,
it'd be nice to see that as part of the whole picture.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Councillor Keto? Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Ryan. Really exciting project. None of the trails give me any concerns, but I hate to get stuck on the solar charging stations. It's I'm a little confused as we're going. When I first heard about the project, a solar charging station as a standalone makes complete sense to me, where you haven't got any infrastructure coming in. But we're living in a place that has 100% renewable power from hydro. I'm kind of just struggling why we'd want to give up public space in the Platzel to build something that we could just put an outlet in there. Right. Just a comment more than anything. Like I maybe it's a proof of concept, I don't know, but it makes sense where these are standalone. But putting one in the Platzel and taking up public space with solar cells, I'm really struggling with it.
Yeah, that's where the idea of those lockers came into play. Looking into maybe that's a better solution.
So that's still up for debate then?
Yeah, I would say it's still up for debate. And I think someone like Andrew Bond could probably speak more to the concept behind the solar charging stations. And then I'm working with Kyle and a few others to kind of figure out the best solution to those ideas. Because definitely don't want to add more than we need to.
Yeah, because we could definitely provide a lot of plugins with not much cost, really.
Yeah, and I think there's just that transition between the original grant application and how it was envisioned, moving more along the outskirts of town, and then how the grant contribution agreement came in with majority of projects needing to be in town. So making that transition and that mind shift of originally it was solar charging, and now is that the best option? Still, we definitely need to look at that.
Councillor Dallin.
So to quell some of the concern here, in regards to the charging station concept in the Platzel, it would be strictly grid tied, solar, no batteries, because we don't need them with that infrastructure that's already in place. But it is still a draw, and we're creating the habits for people to be using renewable energy in that way and be used to more solar panels in their environment. So it's as much changing the conversation from a plug in the wall to a bit of a conversation. So it's not perfect, but it's more of a step forward. With the other solar station with the full battery gambit, it looks like we can reduce that and create more of the, say, satellite stations such as the Eco Park in Marysville and things like that, where people can go and have lunch at any of the restaurants nearby and have their battery charging, come back, get it, go on their way. Again, just encouraging a greener way of thinking. Then with the major unit itself, leaning more towards portable design so that we can have it at Round the Mountain. We can have it at big events or where it's most needed, and then having that conversation evolve as more information comes available.
Yeah, that is one thing, thank you, that I didn't kind of put as an item there, was the portable charging station. And that's where the big proof of concept will come into play.
So Ryan, just if I may,
Yep.
there was a few things that were mentioned that I just wanted to kind of emphasize. One thing that you mentioned was that, when the Magic Line was built, the techniques then and the knowledge base just wasn't what it is now, right? So what you can put into practice is far more sustainable and durable than what was done previously. Just wanted to emphasize that.
Yeah, we've learned a ton. I'd be happy to walk anyone and show, but we've learned even what the dirt up there is capable of. And generally, a 10% grade is what that kind of dirt can withstand. If you go around the Nordic Center and you actually measure the different grades and you look at the ground, you go, oh, this part's blown to bits and there's rocks everywhere and it needs raking every 2 months. And you measure the grade, it's always above 10% and usually above 15%. And then you go, oh, why isn't this part deteriorating? And it's usually because it is that 10% grade or less.
Third
Question.
final question.
Oh, I got all night. Everybody else is ready to go, but I don't know if Scott, you might know the existing EV charger. Do we have any metrics on what kind of use that is getting? Because I don't, like, personally going through there, I haven't seen a ton of use. I've seen some, but I don't know if it's. Oh, sorry, Kent might have the answer here.
No, I don't. Oh, I just
Sorry.
kidding.
Scott.
I don't have the numbers on hand. I think we were hoping for more use. But I don't think we're doing a great job advertising that it's there either.
Okay.
Usually takes word of mouth, and people in Teslas have their own mapping system for where the charging stations are. So I think it does take a bit of time to catch on.
Okay, I was just wondering that in conjunction with Councillor Goodwin's thoughts about putting EV charging stations with Electrify the Mountains pieces. So
I think it's fair to say the more charging stations you have, the more local people will feel comfortable gearing up and buying those types of cars.
Fair. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think that communities all across BC putting in EV charging stations is how you get people out of gas cars and into electric cars. And you have to stay way out in front of the demand. People in the city need to feel comfortable. If they buy an electric car, they can go anywhere and get it charged without standing in line. So I think we need quite a few more EV chargers in the East Kootenay and more in Kimberley to build that electric highway, and then the momentum towards electric cars everywhere will just skyrocket and we'll be off fossil fuels in no time. So
Ryan, I've got one from me anyway. Final question, comment would be around the communications of this, what is a huge project, a very positive, exciting project, is to work, I'm assuming, closely with Pam and the city to, as the project starts to unfold, so people can follow along. There's a lot of interest on this. but the project's complex. There's a lot of different pieces. So it'd be nice to see communication coming out all the time as to where everything is at, what's going on, you know, that kind of stuff. I think it's a very exciting project, so it'd be nice to have the city, as much as the city can, you know, relay information on what's happening. I know there's limits there, but it'd be nice to see that.
Yeah, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that a lot of communications need to be approved by the actual grant. Am I wrong there, Jim? Or am I right there?
They don't necessarily need to be approved by the funding authority, but in any communications that go out that are specific to the project, we need to mention that the project is being funded by through that grant program.
Okay. Yeah, I see a lot of exciting opportunity. I really like what the city did with their story map on and how they got feedback for the active transportation plan and envision something similar, including a website that is slowly built out as this project moves forward. I would like to use some of the project administration funds to hire somebody or a group to do that piece properly, that can coordinate with all the different pieces and groups that are involved in it.
Yeah, it's a very exciting time. Thank you very much, Ryan. I'll just do one final call for questions. This last call. Anybody got any comments, questions? Okay. I just to thank you very much for your time tonight, Ryan. We've kind of held you beyond the 12-minute presentation limitation that we usually hold people to. And
I wasn't told about that 12 minutes. Sorry.
You're earning your overtime here, big time. So no, we really appreciate your time tonight. It was very, very interesting. Much appreciated. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan.
Good.
Yes, thanks for all your questions and time.
Okay. Let me just get my computer up and running again here.
I think we're done.
I think we're done. The report that Scott originally put in, do we need to, that's just part of background? Yeah, okay. So we're good. It's already been received. Councilor Keto.
Just wondering, like, I really am struggling with the budget on this project quite a lot. The trails part is really well lined out, contingencies, everything in there. But on the sustainable Kimberley side with the charging stations, it's still very, very much up in the air. I'm just wondering if there's any appetite from council to hear more from sustainable Kimberley to get a little bit more background on that side of the project.
Just to comment on that, I don't think it would hurt. I mean, it's definitely a concern. I mean, that's a huge.
It's a lot of budget.
Yeah.
Very thin on the ground for details.
Yeah, okay.
So I guess I'm wondering we had some good discussion here and we kicked around some new ideas and some different thoughts. And there's obviously not everything on that side of the project has been settled. Is the process forward to just let Sustainable Kimberley work on it, or does the city is there back and forth with them? Or, I mean, the grant application's already gone in and we've got the money. I don't know what can be done.
It's really the city's grant, and we were seeking their guidance on how to best facilitate this project and spend the money. So what Jim and I are hoping for is approval from council for steps forward on the project. I think the trail stuff, Ryan's done a great job at explaining it, and we'll be working with them over the next few weeks to put together tender documents. But I would recommend we give Sustainable Kimberley some time, because their part of the project has been morphing over, since the application went in. Give them some time, and then if the funding needs to be adjusted later on, we can write to the province at that point, which we have a better grasp of what it is we're doing here.
Okay, sounds good.
So saying that, Scott, if giving them time, so we're coming up to July, August, where there's only 1 month, right? Is there 2 in July?
Yeah, there's no committee meetings and
Just, oh, okay. So we'll still have time to invite them in if we want to go that route.
yeah, I mean, in speaking with them, they're not planning on the city building anything this year related to the charging station side of things.
Okay, yeah, okay,
Lots of time to plan
yeah, okay,
that end.
all right. Any other comments?
Just to reiterate, one piece of this is that this is the first of its kind in North America. The lockers themselves, the best we can find is in 220 volt because it's in the UK. So talking about the proof of concept, I mean, this is a North American first. So and as Scott touched on, there's been a lot of shifting in the goalposts from the original concept to what we are now. So I'm glad that Scott is willing to give us some more time to work on these things. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
We are working on them, just to be absolutely clear.
Okay.
If I could,
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
yeah, I think that, we do have some time to work on the solar charging component of it. It sounds like that's going to be something that'll happen next year as far as construction goes. But given that the contribution agreement indicates that the recipient, it being the city, is responsible for all aspects of the project, including planning, design, it might be prudent for council to approve the various components of the trails projects identified in Ryan's presentation. We're in a committee meeting, so it would be committee making that recommendation to council, but just so that there's some formal approval of that, the trails component. And then, at a later stage, we could have some further discussion about the solar component and have council, sign off on that as well through resolution.
Good idea. You want to go that route, you guys? Councillor Roberts?
Yes, I would agree with that. The other thing we can't lose sight of, though, is that the solar component is the component. This is electrify the mountain, right? So we've got to make sure that we do that once and we do that right. And I think that giving them that time to do that development is really important, but should everything else be held on hold until that happens? I don't believe so.
Mayor McCormick?
Just a clarification, it's the e-bike that is the electrification part. Obviously, if you have an e-bike, you have to charge it.
Yeah.
So, they are definitely together. But the big part of the project right away is getting the trails adapted to be able to take the e-bikes and the adaptive bikes. And because if you don't have that done,
Matter where.
in a project. So yeah, I think the actual hardware side of it, has been mentioned a couple of times, is really not being put in place till next year. And quite frankly, the way things are moving with the technology and the execution of the technology, what's available today versus what's going to be available even, 6 or 12 months from now there will be other options. So, I think that, I think it would be premature to lock anything down with respect to the hardware portion, right now.
Okay, Councillor
I'd like to make a motion to approve the trails component of the project to the regular meeting.
Okay, so
Recommend approval.
Recommend approval, yeah.
Yeah, recommendation to approve.
Is that project one specifically, or?
Specifically, yeah, the trails
The
component.
trails component. Okay,
I
second.
would second that.
Okay. Any discussion on that? Comments? Scott, you comfortable with that? Yeah. Jim?
Excuse me, I just want to confirm that it was Councillor McBain that seconded.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'm just nodding, seeing over there. Yeah, sorry about
I
that.
get
Very subtle.
you.
Yes, Councillor Keto moves recommendation and Councillor McBain seconded. Okay, no further discussion? All in favor? All in favor, no one opposed, approved, carried.
Adjournment.
Move adjournment, second, Mayor McCormick. Councillor McBain, seconds, all in favor? Carried, adjourned.
Ryan.
Thank you. Thanks,
I'm
Jim.
tired, so.